Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadowman Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Catherine Nakamura, but everyone calls me Kit. I've been a park ranger at Death Valley for 11 years now, and I've seen everything the desert can throw at you. Heat that melts your shoes, rocks that cut like razors, snakes that kill with one bite. I've pulled 150 people out of situations that should have killed them. But I never believed in monsters. The desert has enough real dangers without making up new ones. It was July 15th, 1985, and the temperature hit 127 degrees by noon. I was sitting in my truck trying to stay cool when the radio crackled to life. "Kit, we got a missing person report," said dispatch. "Professional photographer named Maya Chen, last seen 3 days ago near the old mining town at Badwater Basin." I sighed and grabbed my hat. Badwater Basin was 40 miles from the nearest settlement, nothing but salt flats and abandoned buildings. In this heat, 3 days was basically a death sentence. "I'm on my way," I said. As I drove toward the basin, I tried to focus on the job, but my mind kept drifting to the phone call I'd gotten that morning. My ex-husband wanting to talk about our daughter Emma's custody arrangement, again. He thought I worked too much, spent too much time in dangerous places. Maybe he was right. The mining town came into view as the sun started to sink. It was a ghost town now, just a few crumbling buildings and the entrance to an old mine shaft. The whole place was surrounded by salt flats that stretched for miles in every direction. When the light hit them right, they looked like mirrors reflecting the sky. I parked near the biggest building and got out. The heat hit me like a wall, even with the sun getting lower. I grabbed my gear and started looking around. "Maya Chen?" I called out. "Park Service?" Nothing but echoes. I found her camera first, sitting on a wooden crate inside what used to be the town's General store. The film was still in it, so I decided to develop it back at the station. Maybe it would give me clues about where she went. That's when I saw the footprints. They were clear in the salt, leading from the store toward the mine shaft. 2 sets of prints, walking side by side. But here's the weird part. There was only 1 set of gear marks, like someone was carrying everything for both people. I followed the prints to the mine entrance. It was boarded up, but some of the boards had been pulled away. Fresh scratches in the wood. "Maya," I called into the darkness. "Can you hear me?" A sound came back. Not an echo of my voice, but something else, like someone crying. I clicked on my flashlight and squeezed through the opening. The mine shaft went straight down, with old wooden stairs built into the walls. My light showed the steps going down about 30 feet before disappearing into black. The crying sound came again. Definitely human. I started down the steps, testing each one before putting my full weight on it. The wood creaked and groaned, but held. As I went deeper, the air got cooler, almost cold after the blazing heat outside. At the bottom, my light caught something white against the far wall. It was Maya Chen, or what was left of her. She was sitting against the wall, eyes closed, looking almost peaceful. But she'd been dead for days in 130-degree heat. Her body should have been, well, let's just say it should have looked a lot worse. I knelt down and checked for a pulse, even though I knew it was pointless. Her skin was cool to the touch, in a mine shaft that should have been like an oven. That's when I noticed something else. My flashlight beam was reflecting off something on the ground. I moved closer and saw it was a small pool of water, perfectly still, and in that water I could see a reflection. But it wasn't my reflection. It was Maya, looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes. Her mouth was moving like she was trying to say something. I jerked back, and the image was gone. Just dark water reflecting my light. I need to get out of here, I thought. Heat exhaustion was making me see things. I'd been in the desert too long. But as I climbed back up the shaft, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. And when I got back to my truck, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were 4 sets of footprints around my vehicle, but I'd been alone. I called for backup on my radio, trying to keep my voice steady. This is Ranger Nakamura. I found the missing photographer. She's dead. I need another ranger out here and a coroner. Copy that, Kit. Ranger Ritchie is about 20 minutes out. Tony Ritchie was a good guy. Been with the Park Service for about 5 years. I was glad it was him coming and not one of the rookies. While I waited, I developed Maya's film using the portable kit I kept in my truck. The first few photos were normal. Landscape shots of the desert, some artistic pictures of the abandoned buildings. But then I got to the last few frames and my hands started shaking. They were pictures of Maya herself, but they were taken from angles that were impossible. One showed her from above like someone was floating in the air. Another showed her from behind while she was clearly taking a picture forward. And in the last one, she was looking directly at the camera with pure terror on her face. But here's what really got me. In the background of that last photo, I could see a figure standing in the doorway of the building. It looked exactly like Maya, but the real Maya was in the foreground. I heard Tony's truck pulling up and quickly put the photos away. I needed to think about this before I showed them to anyone. "Hey, Kit," Tony called out as he walked over. "Sorry it took so long. Had to stop and help some tourists whose car broke down." Something about his voice didn't sound right. Too friendly, maybe. Tony was usually more serious on calls like this. "Where's the bee, Odie?" he asked. I pointed toward the mine shaft. "Down there." "But Tony, something's not right about this whole situation." He smiled, and that's when I noticed his teeth looked too white, too perfect. "What do you mean?" "The body. It's not decomposed like it should be, and there are extra footprints around here." Tony nodded and started walking toward the mine. "Let's go take a look." As we approached the shaft, I noticed something else wrong. The sun was setting, and our shadows were falling on the salt flats. But while my shadow looked normal, Tony's seemed to be moving independently, like it was walking at a different pace. "Tony, did you call me before you came out here?" He stopped walking and turned to look at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did you radio me directly? Because dispatch said you were coming, but I never heard from you personally." His smile got wider. "Does it matter?" We squeezed through the opening and climbed down into the mine. Maya's body was still there, unchanged. Tony knelt down next to her and felt for a pulse, just like I had. "Definitely dead," he said. "But you're right about the condition. She should look a lot worse after 3 days in this heat." He stood up, and his flashlight beam swept across the small pool of water. For just a second, I saw something in the reflection again. Not Maya this time, but Tony. Only the Tony in the water was looking right at me with eyes that were completely black. "Did you see that?" I whispered. "See what?" I looked at Tony's face. His eyes were normal brown, same as always. "Nothing. Just, let's get out of here." But as we climbed back up, I noticed Tony wasn't breathing hard at all. The climb was steep and we were both carrying gear, but he wasn't even sweating, in a 120-degree heat. When we got back to the surface, Tony walked over to his truck and grabbed his radio. "This is Ranger Ritchie. He got a body in the mine shaft. Gonna need a coroner and probably a helicopter to get her out." "Copy that, Tony. ETA on the coroner is about 2 hours. 2 hours. That meant we'd be stuck out here until well after dark. "I'm gonna go check the perimeter," Tony said. "Make sure there's no evidence we missed." He walked away and I watched his reflection in the side mirror of my truck. That's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the mirror, Tony was walking in the opposite direction. While the real Tony was walking toward the old store, his reflection was walking toward me. I spun around, but Tony was exactly where he should be, examining the ground near the building. I need to get out of here, I thought. Something was very wrong with this whole situation. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Nakamura. I need you to patch me through to my ex-husband." "Kit, this is an emergency channel. This is an emergency, please." A few minutes later, I heard David's voice. "Kit, what's wrong?" "I need you to tell me exactly where you are right now." "I'm at home. Emma's here with me. We're making dinner. Why?" And I haven't been there today? You haven't seen me? There was a pause. Kit, you're scaring me. What's going on? Before I could answer, I heard Tony calling my name. But when I looked around, I couldn't see him anywhere. Kit! The voice was coming from the mine shaft. Come quick, I found something. I looked at my truck's side mirror again. Tony's reflection was standing right behind me, even though I couldn't see him with my own eyes. That's when I heard my own voice coming from the mine shaft. Tony, help me! I'm trapped! But I was standing right there, holding the radio. Someone was down in that mine, calling for help in my voice, and someone who looked like Tony was standing behind me, even though I couldn't see him. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I ran to my truck and locked the doors, my hands shaking as I tried to start the engine. In the side mirror, I could see Tony standing by the mine shaft, waving at me, like nothing was wrong. But I could also see him in the passenger seat next to me, even though the seat was empty. The engine finally caught, and I hit the gas, spraying salt and sand as I sped away from the mining town. I needed to get somewhere safe, somewhere with other people. But as I drove, I kept checking my mirrors. Sometimes Tony was in the back seat. Sometimes he was running alongside the truck, keeping pace even though I was doing 60. And sometimes I saw myself in the mirrors, but not the me that was driving. This other me was smiling and waving, like she was having the time of her life. My radio crackled. Kit, this is dispatch. We just got a weird call. Someone claiming to be you called your ex-husband and threatened to take your daughter. He's pretty upset. That wasn't me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm out at Badwater Basin. Are you sure? Because he said you were standing in his living room when you called. I grabbed the radio so hard my knuckles turned white. Patch me through to him, now. Kit, I can't keep using emergency channels for— Do it! A few seconds later, David's voice came through, and he sounded terrified. Kit, what the hell is wrong with you? You came to my house, you scared Emma, and then you just vanished. She's crying and asking why Mommy was being mean. David, I'm 40 miles away from your house. I never left the desert. Don't lie to me. You were here. Emma saw you. She said you looked at her funny and told her she'd be better off without a mommy who's never home. My heart felt like it was breaking. I would never say that to her. Then how do you explain— The radio went dead. I was about 10 miles from the main road when I saw the roadblock. 3 Park Service vehicles parked across the pavement with rangers standing behind them. As I got closer, I could see Tony was one of them. I stopped the truck and rolled down my window. What's going on? Kit, Tony said, walking up to my door. We need to talk. About what? About why you killed Maya Chen. I stared at him. What are you talking about? We found your fingerprints on her camera, your footprints at the scene, and several witnesses say they saw you arguing with her the day she disappeared. That's impossible. I never met Maya Chen before today. Tony smiled that too perfect smile. Are you sure about that? He handed me a photograph. It showed me and Maya standing together outside the mining town, both of us smiling. But I'd never seen this picture before in my life. This was taken 3 days ago, Tony said, right before she died. I looked at the other rangers. They were all watching me with suspicious eyes. This is crazy. You know me, Tony. I've never hurt anyone. Do we know you? One of the other rangers asked. Because lately, you've been acting pretty strange. They were right. I had been acting strange. Missing meetings, forgetting conversations, making decisions that didn't sound like me. But I thought it was just stress from the custody battle. I need to make a phone call, I said. I'm afraid we can't let you do that, Tony said. You're under arrest for the murder of Maya Chen. That's when I saw him in my rearview mirror. The real Tony. He was tied up in the back of one of the Park Service vehicles, his mouth taped shut, his eyes wide with terror. The Tony standing next to my truck wasn't Tony at all. I hit the gas pedal and smashed through the roadblock. In my mirrors, I could see the fake rangers running after me, but they were moving wrong. Too fast, like they were gliding instead of running. I drove straight toward the main highway, But when I got there, it was gone. Just more desert, stretching in every direction. I turned around and drove back the way I came, but the road had changed. Now it led to a different part of the desert, one I'd never seen before. I was lost in a place I'd worked for 11 years. The sun was setting and I was running out of gas. I pulled it over and tried to figure out where I was. The landscape looked familiar but wrong somehow, like someone had taken Death Valley and rearranged it. That's when I saw the mining town again. It was exactly where it shouldn't be, about a mile away across the salt flats. But this time, there were lights in the windows. I grabbed my binoculars and looked closer. There were people moving around inside the buildings, and one of them looked like me. I was trapped in a maze of desert that didn't follow the rules of geography, being hunted by things that wore familiar faces. And somewhere out there, something was living my life, terrorizing my daughter and destroying everything I cared about. I started walking toward the town, my pistol in my hand. Whatever was happening, I was going to end it. But as I walked across the salt flats, I noticed my reflection in the white ground. Sometimes I was walking alone. Sometimes there were dozens of me, all walking in different directions. And sometimes my reflection was walking backward, like it was trying to get away from something. The mining town was full of people when I got there, but they were all me. Different versions of me doing different things. One was cooking dinner, another was reading a book, a third was playing with a little girl who looked like Emma. They all looked happy, peaceful, like they'd found the life they always wanted. I hid behind the old general store and tried to figure out what was happening. Through the windows, I could see the Emmys living perfect lives. No stress, no custody battles, no dangerous job in the desert. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind me. I spun around, gun ready. It was me, but not me. This version looked older, sadder, like she'd seen too much. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm you," she said. "Or rather, I'm who you could be. We all are." "What do you mean?" The Shadow Walker feeds on misery, on people who hate their lives, who wish they could be someone else. It offers them exactly what they want, a perfect reflection of themselves, living the life they always dreamed of. And the catch? The catch is that it's all fake. The Shadow Walker takes your place in the real world, living your life, making your choices. Usually it does a better job than you did. I thought about the phone call from David, about Emma crying because Mommy was being mean. It's been pretending to be me. For weeks now. Haven't you noticed how much better your life has been lately? How much easier everything seemed. She was right. The last few weeks had been strange. I'd been making decisions that didn't feel like my decisions, having conversations I didn't remember. But things had been going well. My supervisor had praised my work. David had been less angry about the custody arrangement. But today something went wrong, I said. Today you saw through the illusion. That's why you're here, in the Shadow Walker's domain. It's trying to convince you to stay, to let it keep living your life. What happens if I do? You get to be happy forever. And the real world gets a version of you that's everything you wish you could be. I looked through the window again. The me inside was tucking the little girl into bed, reading her a story. The girl was smiling, laughing. She looked like she loved her mommy. Emma would be happier, I said. Yes. David would be happier. Yes. Everyone would be happier. Everyone except you, because you'd know it was all fake. A new voice joined us. But fake happiness is still happiness. I turned and saw the Shadow Walker. It looked exactly like me, but its eyes were black holes that seemed to go on forever. "You're tired," it said in my voice. "You're tired of fighting for custody of a daughter who might be better off without you. You're tired of a job that puts you in danger every day. You're tired of being alone." It was right. I was tired. "I can give you everything you want," it continued. "A perfect life where you're the perfect mother, the perfect ranger, the perfect person. All you have to do is stay here." "What about Maya Chen? What about Tony?" "Mistakes," it said. "I was still learning to be you, but I'm better now." I can be everything you always wanted to be. I looked at my gun. Then I looked at the Shadow Walker. Then I looked at the window where the perfect me was living the perfect life. No, I said. No. No, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I work too much and I don't spend enough time with my daughter and I'm scared I'm going to lose her. But I'm real. Those mistakes are mine. That fear is mine. And that love I have for Emma, that's mine too. The Shadow Walker's face twisted with rage. You're choosing misery over happiness. I'm choosing truth over lies. That's when all the Mies in the town turned to look at me. Their faces were angry now, disappointed, like I was ruining their perfect lives. You can't stop me, the Shadow Walker said. I'm already out there living your life, making it better. Maybe, I said, but I'm going to try. I raised my gun and fired, but the bullet went right through the Shadow Walker like it was made of smoke. It laughed. You can't kill a reflection. But I wasn't trying to kill it. I was trying to break it. I turned and shot at every reflective surface I could see. Windows, mirrors, even the puddles of water on the ground. With each shot, the Shadow Walker screamed and became more transparent. You're destroying everything, it shouted. All the happiness, all the perfection. Good, I said. The town started to fade around me. The perfect Mies were dissolving, their happy lives disappearing like smoke. The Shadow Walker was becoming weaker, more see-through, but it wasn't gone. I'll always be with you, it whispered. Every time you look in a mirror, every time you see your reflection, I'll be there, reminding you of wah-wah that you could have had. And then, everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. The doctors said I'd been found unconscious near the mining town, severely dehydrated, and talking about reflections that weren't there. Heat exhaustion, they said. Hallucinations brought on by too much sun and not enough water. The official report said Maya Chen died of dehydration after getting lost in the mine shaft. Tony Ricci was found tied up in his truck, claiming he'd been attacked by someone who looked exactly like him. But there was no evidence of another person, so they wrote it off as heat-induced confusion. I didn't argue with any of it. What was I going to say? That a shape-shifting creature had been living my life while I was trapped in a mirror dimension? They'd lock me up. But I knew the truth. And the truth was that it wasn't over. I went home to an apartment I'd never seen before. The Shadow Walker had redecorated while it was pretending to be me. Everything was neat, organized, perfect, not like me at all. David called the next day. Kid, I wanted to apologize for what I said the other day. I know you'd never threaten Emma like that. You must have been really stressed about the custody hearing. Custody hearing? Next week, don't you remember? You rescheduled it for next Friday. You said you had some new evidence that would help your case. I didn't remember any of that. But when I checked my desk, I found legal documents in my handwriting, notes about the case that I'd never written. The Shadow Walker had been busy. I called my lawyer, but she said I'd already been in touch with her several times. She seemed confused when I asked about the new evidence. You brought it to me yourself, she said. Character references, work evaluations, even a recommendation from your supervisor. You said you'd been working on getting your life together. Character references I'd never asked for. Work evaluations I'd never seen. All in my handwriting. That night I covered every mirror in my apartment with sheets. I couldn't look at reflective surf. ACs anymore without seeing something that wasn't quite right. A smile that lasted too long. Eyes that looked too knowing. A me that was just a little too perfect. Emma called while I was covering the bathroom mirror. Mommy, are you okay? Daddy says you were sick. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. You sounded different the other day when you came to visit. Daddy said you were stressed, but you seemed... I don't know. Not like you. What do you mean? You were too happy. Like you were pretending to be happy. It was scary. Out of the mouths of babes. Even a 7-year-old could tell the difference between the real me and the shadow walker. "I love you, Emma," I said. "I love you too, Mommy. The real you." I hung up and finished covering the mirror, but I could still feel it watching me from behind the sheet. A week later, I won the custody case. The judge was impressed by my character references and my apparent efforts to improve my work-life balance. I should have been happy, but all I could think about was how I'd gotten those references. They weren't from the real me. I've been living with this for 6 months now. I got my daughter back, got a promotion at work, even started dating again. My life is better than it's ever been. But I know it's not really my life. It's the life the Shadow Walker built for me, using my face and my name. Every success feels hollow because I didn't earn it. And sometimes, late at night, I catch glimpses of movement in the covered mirrors. Like something is still in there, waiting for me to look. I've started researching similar cases. Missing persons in places with lots of reflective surfaces. Lakes, buildings with mirrored walls, even store windows. The pattern is always the same. People disappear and then return with improved lives and no memory of where they've been. I think the Shadow Walker is still out there, moving from person to person, offering them perfect lives in exchange for their souls. And I think I might be the only one who knows how to stop it. But that means going back to the mirrors, back to the place where reflections don't match reality. I don't know if I'm brave enough to do that, but I know I have to try, because somewhere out there, there's another Maya Chen, another Tony Ricci, another scared parent who just wants their life to be a little bit better. And they deserve to know the truth about what they're giving up, even if the truth is uglier than the lie. I just hope when I look in the mirror next time, I'll be strong enough to see myself as I really am, not as I wish I could be. My name is Michael O'Sullivan, but everyone calls me Mick. I've been a ranger for 19 years now, working the Superior National Forest up in Minnesota. I've seen a lot of things in those woods. Bears, wolves, storms that could kill a man in minutes. But I always thought I understood how nature worked. Animals follow patterns. They're predictable. I was wrong about that. It was January 1987, and the cold had been sitting on us for weeks like a heavy blanket. 25 below zero most days. And the ice storm that hit made everything worse. The radio crackled in my truck as I drove the frozen logging road toward Hoffman's Lodge. Carl Hoffman's voice sounded tight, worried. "Mick, you need to get up here fast. Something killed my whole dog team last night, all 12 of them." I'd known Carl for 8 years. He ran a small wilderness lodge about 50 miles from the nearest real road. Hunters and fishermen came up in the summer, but winter was quiet. Just Carl, his wife, and maybe a few hardy guests who liked the isolation. "What kind of something?" I asked, though I already knew. We'd been tracking a small wolf pack in that area for months. 3 adults, probably looking for territory. "I don't know, Mick. It's not like anything I've seen before." The lodge sat on the edge of frozen lake, surrounded by thick pine forest. When I pulled up, I could see the problem right away. The dog yard was a mess of blood and scattered gear. But what bothered me wasn't the carnage. Wolves kill to eat, and they can be brutal about it. What bothered me was how complete it was. Every single dog was gone except for scattered bones and torn collars. Carl met me at the door. He was a big man, used to handling problems himself, but his hands shook as he poured coffee. "They ate everything, Mick, even the bones. And look at this." He led me to the window facing the forest. In the snow, clear as day, were tracks. Wolf tracks, but too many of them. I counted at least 15 sets, maybe more. That made no sense. Our pack had 3 members, and wolves don't gather in groups that large. Not here. "When did this happen?" I asked. "Sometime after midnight. I heard the dogs barking around one, but they stopped real sudden-like. In the morning, this is what I found." I walked the perimeter, taking photos and measurements. The tracks were fresh, maybe 6 hours old. But here's what really got to me. There were no other animal tracks anywhere. No rabbits, no squirrels, no birds. The forest was completely empty, except for these wolves. Carl, how many guests you got right now? 8. City folks mostly. Came up for a winter adventure. They're all inside, pretty shaken up. I nodded and kept studying the tracks. Something was wrong here, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The tracks were the right size and shape for wolves, but they seemed to follow too perfect a pattern, like they were organized. Wolves hunt in packs, sure, but not like this. This looked almost military. I'll set up some cameras tonight, I told Carl. Try to get a count on how many we're dealing with. In the meantime, keep everyone inside after dark. That evening I placed 6 trail cameras around the lodge property. The temperature was dropping fast and the wind made it feel like 40 below. I could hear wolves howling in the distance, but the sound was wrong somehow. It echoed too much, like it was coming from everywhere at once. Back inside, I met the guests. There was Dr. Sarah Chen, a professor from Minneapolis, Tom and Jennifer Walsh, a young couple on their honeymoon, 4 others whose names I didn't catch right away. They all looked nervous, and I didn't blame them. Are we safe in here? Dr. Chen asked. Wolves don't attack buildings, I told her. They're smart enough to know. I'll bet her. You'll be fine as long as you stay inside. But even as I said it, I felt uneasy. Those tracks bothered me. Too organized, too many animals. Something was different about this pack. That night I couldn't sleep. The howling continued, but now it sounded almost like voices, like people calling to each other across the frozen lake. I told myself it was just the wind playing tricks, but I kept my rifle close anyway. I checked the cameras first thing in the morning. Every single one was empty. 6 cameras, 8 hours of recording, and nothing. But the tracks were everywhere, fresh from the night before. It was like the wolves knew exactly where the cameras were and avoided them. That's when I found Maria Santos. She was the lodge cook, a cheerful woman from Guatemala who'd been working for Carl for 3 years. I found her in the kitchen, or what was left of her. Something had torn her throat out, and parts of her were missing. But here's what made my blood run cold. The bite marks weren't just from wolves. Some of them looked human. Jesus Christ, Carl whispered when he saw her. What kind of animal does this? I knelt beside the body, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The wound patterns were all wrong. Wolf bites are deep and crushing. These were more like cuts, precise and deliberate. And the human bite marks, I'd never seen anything like them. Carl, I need you to get on the radio. Call for backup and a medical examiner. He tried for 20 minutes. Nothing but static. The ice storm had knocked out the repeater tower, and we were too far from civilization for the handheld radios to reach anyone. We're on our own, he said. That's when I heard Jennifer Walsh screaming. I ran outside and found her pointing at the tree line. Something was moving between the pines, but I couldn't get a clear look. It was big, much bigger than a normal wolf, and it moved wrong. Too upright. Too purposeful. It was watching us, she said, crying. It was just standing there, watching. I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the forest. Nothing. But I could feel eyes on me, like that prickly feeling you get when someone's staring at you from across a room. Tom, get your wife inside. Everyone stays in the main room from now on. I spent the day trying to make sense of what was happening. The tracks kept multiplying, but I never saw the animals that made them. The forest stayed dead quiet except for the howling that started up every time the sun went down. That night, Pete Kowalski arrived. He was another ranger, my partner on most of the big predator problems. I was never so glad to see anyone in my life. What the hell is going on up here, Mick? He asked, looking at the photos I'd taken. I don't know, but it's not normal wolves. Look at these bite patterns. Pete studied the pictures from Maria's body. He was quiet for a long time, then shook his head. This is way above our pay grade. We need to evacuate these people. With what? The roads snowed in, and we can't get a helicopter in this weather. Then we waited out. How long can it take? That's when we heard the howling start again, but this time it was different. It sounded like voices, human voices, calling our names. Clear as day, I heard something that sounded like my ex-wife calling, Mick, Mick, come home. Pete grabbed my arm. Tell me you heard that too. I nodded. We both had. The howling continued for hours, voices of people we knew, people we loved, calling to us from the dark forest. But underneath it all was something else. A sound like laughter, cold and hungry. "They're playing with us," Pete said. "What's playing with us?" "I don't know. But whatever killed Maria, it's not done." Around midnight, Dr. Chen started screaming. When we got to her room, she was standing at the window, pointing outside. In the snow, maybe 30 yards from the lodge, stood a circle of shapes. They looked like wolves, but they were standing on their hind legs, perfectly still, just watching us. "How long have they been there?" I asked. "I don't know. I just woke up and they were there." I counted 12 of them, maybe more. They stood like soldiers in formation, not moving, not making any sound, just watching. "Get everyone into the main room," I told Pete. "Board up the windows. We're going to have a long night." But even as we worked, I could feel them out there, waiting. And I was starting to realize that whatever was hunting us, it wasn't just hungry. It was intelligent. The attack came at 3 in the morning. They hit the lodge from all sides at once, like they'd planned it. The windows exploded inward, and suddenly the main room was full of shadows and snarling. But these weren't normal wolves. They stood 7 feet tall with arms that ended in claws and faces that looked almost human. Tom Walsh died first. One of the creatures grabbed him as he ran for the stairs, and I heard his neck snap. Jennifer screamed and kept screaming until another one silenced her. The sound she made at the end wasn't human. "The kitchen!" I yelled to Pete. "There's a back way out." We herded the remaining guests toward the kitchen, but Dr. Chen tripped and fell. I turned back to help her, and that's when I saw Pete's face. His eyes had changed. They were golden now, like a wolf's eyes, and when he smiled, his teeth were too sharp. "Pete?" "They offered me a choice, Mick," he said in a voice that wasn't quite his anymore. "Join them or die. I chose to live." He lunged at me, but I was ready. I put 2 bullets in his chest and he went down. But he was still smiling. "You can't kill us all," he whispered. "We're already inside." That's when I understood. The curse spread through bites, through blood. Tom and Jennifer weren't just dead. They were coming back. I grabbed Dr. Chen and the remaining guests and barricaded us in the kitchen. Outside, I could hear them moving around, talking to each other in voices that had once been human. They were organized, patient. They had all the time in the world. "What do they want?" Carl asked. "I don't think they want anything," I said. "I think they're just hungry." The radio crackled to life, static at first, then voices. My sons, Danny and Kevin, calling for me. "Dad? Dad, where are you? We need you to come home." But their voices were wrong too. Too cold, too knowing. And in the background I could hear howling. "They've got my boys," I said. "That's not possible," Dr. Chen said. "They're in Minneapolis. They're safe." "Nothing's safe anymore." The creatures outside started laughing. It was the sound of wolves, but it was also the sound of people I'd known, people I'd trusted. Pete's laugh was loudest of all. "Mick," came a voice from outside. "Tom Walsh, but not Tom Walsh. We know you're in there. We know you're scared. But it doesn't have to be this way." "What do you want?" I called back. "Your family has been running from us for a long time. Your grandfather knew us. Your father knew us. And now it's your turn." "I don't understand." The O'Sullivan line carries something special, something we need. Join us willingly, and we'll let your sons live. Fight us, and they'll die screaming. Through the kitchen window, I could see them gathering in the yard, more than before. Tom and Jennifer were there, but they weren't human anymore. They stood with the others, watching, waiting. "How do I know you're telling the truth about my sons?" The radio crackled again. This time, it was Danny's voice, but older, colder. "Dad, we're already here. We've been waiting for you." I looked out the window, and there they were. My boys, standing with the pack. But their eyes were golden, and when they smiled, I could see the teeth. "No," I whispered. "Yes," said the voice that used to be Pete. "Your bloodline ends tonight, Mick, one way or another." The creatures started moving toward the lodge again, but this time they weren't rushing. They walked slowly, delkiss, iberately. They knew we had nowhere to go. "Is there another way out?" I asked Carl. "The basement. There's a tunnel that leads to the generator shed." "How far?" 50 yards. But it's not heated. In this cold, we wouldn't last 10 minutes. I looked at the remaining guests. Besides Dr. Chen and Carl, there were only 2 others left. An older man named Frank and a young woman named Katie. 5 people against an army of monsters. "We can't fight them," Dr. Chen said. "No," I agreed, "but maybe we can hurt them." I started pulling propane tanks from the kitchen stove. If I could create a big enough explosion, maybe I could take some of them with me. Maybe I could buy time for the others to escape. "What about your sons?" Carl asked. I looked out the window again. The creatures that wore my sons' faces were getting closer. In a few minutes, they'd be at the door. "Those aren't my sons," I said. "Not anymore." The first creature to reach the kitchen door was the thing that used to be Tom Walsh. He pressed his face against the glass, and I could see the intelligence in his eyes. These weren't mindless monsters. They were predators, and they enjoyed the hunt. "Mick," he said, his voice almost normal except for the growling undertone. "You're only making this harder on yourself." "Stay back," I shouted, but I knew it was useless. The door wouldn't hold them for long. That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a red glow. The creatures outside started howling again, but this time it sounded like celebration. They were done playing games. The door exploded inward, and they poured through. I opened fire, but the bullets barely slowed them down. One of them grabbed Frank and dragged him outside. His screams cut off abruptly. "The tunnel!" I yelled to the others. "Go!" Carl led Dr. Chen and Katie toward the basement stairs. I stayed behind, firing at anything that moved. The creature that had been Pete lunged at me, and I put 3 rounds in its chest. It staggered, but kept coming. "You can't win, Mick," it said in Pete's voice. "We're already in your head." It was right. I could feel something changing in my mind, like a door opening to let in cold air. The bite marks on my arm from the first attack were starting to burn. "The curse doesn't just spread through bites," the Pete thing said. "It spreads through fear, through despair. You've been infected since the first night." I looked at my hands. The fingernails were getting longer, sharper. I could smell things I'd never smelled before. The terror of the people in the basement, the blood on the walls, the pack's hunger. "Fight it," I told myself. "Fight it." But it was hard. The change wanted to happen. It would be so much easier to just let go, to join the pack, to hunt instead of being hunted. The creature that wore my son Danny's face appeared in the doorway. "Dad, stop fighting. We're family. We belong together." "You're not Danny." "I'm everything Danny was, plus more. I'm stronger now, faster. I'll never be sick, never be old, never be afraid. Isn't that what you want for your son?" For a moment, I almost believed it. The thing looked so much like Danny, sounded like him. But then I remembered the real Danny, the boy who was afraid of thunderstorms and loved baseball cards. This thing might have his memories, but it didn't have his soul. "Go to hell," I said, and threw the first propane tank. The explosion knocked me backward and set the kitchen on fire. The creatures scattered, howling in pain and rage. But they weren't dead. They were just angry now. I stumbled toward the basement stairs, but the Pete thing was waiting for me. "You can't escape, Mick. Even if you kill all of us, there are more. There are always more." "Maybe," I said, pulling the pins from 2 more tanks. "But I won't make it easy." The second explosion was bigger. The entire back wall of the lodge collapsed and flames shot up to the ceiling. I could hear Tobias. He creatures screaming, but some of it sounded like laughter. In the basement, I found the others huddled by the tunnel entrance. Carl was bleeding from a head wound, and Katie was unconscious. Dr. Chen looked at me with wide eyes. "Are you?" "I'm still me," I said. For now. The tunnel was narrow and cold, carved out of frozen earth. We crawled through it on our hands and knees, the sound of the burning lodge behind us. I could still hear the creatures howling, but they sounded farther away now. The generator shed was small and dark, but it was shelter. I barricaded the door and tried to figure out our next move. The nearest help was 50 miles away, and we had no vehicle. "We can't stay here," Carl said. "They'll find us." "I know." I looked at the radio equipment in the shed. "But maybe I can call for help." I worked with the radio for 20 minutes before I got a weak signal. It was a trucker on Highway 61, about 30 miles south. "This is Ranger O'Sullivan," I said. "I need you to call the sheriff's department. Tell them we have a situation at Hoffman's Lodge. Multiple casualties." "What kind of situation?" I looked at the others. How could I explain what had happened? Who would believe it? "Animal attack," I said. "Send everything you've got." But even as I said it, I knew it was too late. The creatures had found us. The rescue team found me 3 days later, half frozen and barely alive. I was the only survivor. The official report said that an unusually large wolf pack had attacked the lodge during the ice storm. 8 people dead, including a park ranger named Pete Kowalski. The bodies were badly damaged, and the fire had destroyed most of the evidence. Nobody asked too many questions. Animal attacks happen in the wilderness. The story made the local papers for a few days, then disappeared. The lodge was never rebuilt. But I know what really happened that night. And I know it's not over. I retired from the Park Service 6 months later. Couldn't stand to be in the woods anymore. Every shadow looked like a wolf, every sound like howling. I moved to Minneapolis, got a job in an office building, surrounded myself with concrete and steel. But they're still out there. I know because I can feel them watching me. On cold nights when the wind is right, I hear them howling. They're patient. They have all the time in the world. And sometimes late at night I get phone calls. My son's voices calling from numbers that don't exist. "Dad, we're waiting for you. We're all waiting." I change my number, but they always find me. The curse follows bloodlines, and I'm the last of the O'Sullivan line. At least the last one who's still human. I've done research trying to understand what happened. The Ojibwe have stories about creatures they call Wendigo's wolves, shapeshifters that hunt in winter, that can take human form but never lose their hunger. The stories go back hundreds of years, but they all have the same ending. The pack always wins. Sometimes I think about just walking into the woods and getting it over with. It would be easier than living with the fear, the nightmares, the constant watching. But I'm not ready to give up yet. Someone needs to remember what happened at Hoffman's Lodge. Someone needs to warn people. So I write it down, tell the story to anyone who'll listen. Most people think I'm crazy, traumatized by what happened. That's fine. I'd rather be crazy than dead. But if you're reading this, if you're planning a winter trip to the deep woods, remember what I'm telling you. Wolves are predictable animals. They follow patterns, hunt in small groups, avoid humans. If you see a pack that's too large, too organized, too intelligent, run. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to fight it. Just run, and don't look back. Because once they start hunting you, they never stop. And if you hear voices in the howling, voices of people you know calling your name, don't listen. No matter how much, they sound like family. No matter how much they promise, don't listen. They're hungry, and they're patient, and they're still out there. My name is Michael O'Sullivan, and I'm the last one left. But not for long. The pack is coming for me tonight. I can hear them howling. They're hungry. My name is Rebecca Clearwater, but everyone calls me Becca. I've been a park ranger for 13 years now, working the backcountry of Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario. People think it's a quiet job, but they're wrong. In 13 years, I've pulled over 200 people out of situations that would have killed them. Broken bones, hypothermia, bear attacks, getting lost in storms. I've seen it all. Or so I thought. The thing about working in the wilderness is that you learn to trust your gut. When something feels wrong, it usually is. But in February of 1992, I ignored that feeling. I wish I hadn't. It started when Dr. Franklin Stone from the University of Toronto called our office. He needed a guide for his research team. They wanted to study an old fur trading post on Canoe Lake, way out in the backcountry. The place had a dark history. Back in 1847, a group of trappers got snowed in there. When spring came, rescue teams found evidence of cannibalism. Not pretty stuff, but it was history. Dr. Stone was studying how extreme conditions affected human behavior. He had 3 graduate students with him, Amy Wells, Marcus Chen, and Sarah Bennett, all city kids who'd never spent a real winter in the bush. That worried me. "We'll be fine," Dr. Stone said when I mentioned the isolation. "We've got enough supplies for 6 weeks. The supply plane comes every 3 weeks." I should have said no. My grandmother always told me stories about that part of the park. She was Ojibwe, and she knew the old legends. Stories about the Wendigo, a creature born from cannibalism and endless hunger. "Some places hold on to their pain," she used to say. "They remember what happened there." But I didn't believe in grandmother's stories. I thought they were just warnings about winter desperation, about what happens when people get too hungry and too scared. The research station was 8 miles from the nearest settlement. 3 small cabins connected by covered walkways, sitting on the edge of a frozen lake. The scientists had set up their equipment in the main cabin: computers, measuring devices, boxes of old documents about the 1847 incident. Everything seemed normal at first. The team was excited about their work. Dr. Stone was a thin man with gray hair and intense eyes. He talked constantly about the psychological effects of isolation. Amy was the youngest, maybe 22, with red hair and a nervous laugh. Marcus was quiet but smart, always taking notes. Sarah was the practical one, the one who actually knew how to work the camp stove. I was supposed to stay 3 days to help them settle in, then come back in 2 weeks to check on them. But on the second day, something felt off. The woods were too quiet. In 13 years of winter camping, I'd never heard silence like that. No birds, no squirrels, no sound of branches creaking in the wind, just dead silence, like the forest was holding its breath. "Where are all the animals?" Amy asked during lunch. I didn't have an answer. We should have seen tracks in the snow. Deer, rabbits, maybe a fox. But there was nothing, not even old tracks. It was like every living thing had fled the area. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandmother's stories, about the hunger that never ends, about places that remember pain. I left the next morning, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The radio check-ins were scheduled for every other day. The first 2 calls came through fine. Dr. Stone sounded normal, maybe a little tired. The research was going well, he said, but on the 3rd call, something in his voice had changed. "We're having some interesting psychological effects," he said. "The isolation is more intense than we expected." "What kind of effects?" I asked. "Increased appetite. We're going through food faster than planned, and some disturbing dreams." I made a note to check on them early, but before I could arrange transport, the weather turned bad. A massive storm system moved in, bringing temperatures down to -35 and winds that made helicopter flights impossible. For 5 days, I couldn't reach them on the radio. When the storm finally cleared, I flew out with the supply pilot. Something was wrong the moment we landed. The main cabin door was standing open, and there were strange marks in the snow around the buildings. Not footprints exactly, but long gouges, like something had been dragged. I found Dr. Stone in the main cabin, hunched over a pile of documents. He looked up when I entered, and I barely recognized him. In less than 2 weeks, he'd lost maybe 20 pounds. His eyes were sunken, and his hands shook. "Rebecca," he said, and his voice was different, hungry. "You're just in time for dinner." That's when I saw what he was eating. A frozen piece of meat, raw and bloody. At first I thought it was from their emergency rations, but then I saw the fur still attached to one end. "Dr. Stone, what is that?" He looked down at the meat like he was seeing it for the first time. I found a deer, already dead. Couldn't let it go to waste." But there were no deer tracks around the camp, no blood trail. And the meat looked like it had been torn apart by hand, not cut with a knife. "Where are the others?" I asked. "Working," he said. "Always working. Have to keep working. Have to keep busy. If we stop, the hunger gets worse." I found Amy in the second cabin, sitting on her bunk and staring at the wall. She was thin too, but not like Dr. Stone. She looked scared. "Amy, are you okay?" She turned to look at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I can't stop thinking about food," she whispered. "But not regular food. I keep having dreams about eating." She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus was in the third cabin, organizing and reorganizing their supplies. He'd arranged all the sitsu and goods in perfect rows, sorted by type and size. But his hands were shaking as he worked. "Marcus, when did you last eat?" "This morning, or yesterday. I can't remember." He picked up a can of soup and stared at it. "It's never enough. Nothing is ever enough." I found Sarah outside, standing by the frozen lake. She was holding an ice fishing rod, but there was no hole in the ice. She was just standing there, staring at the white surface. "Sarah?" She didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Do you hear them?" "Hear what?" "The voices under the ice. They're calling to us. They want us to join them." I spent the next hour trying to figure out what was happening. The team had plenty of food. I checked the supplies myself, but all four of them were acting like they were starving, and they kept talking about strange dreams, about voices, about an overwhelming hunger that food couldn't satisfy. That night, I woke up to screaming. I ran to the main cabin and found Dr. Stone standing over Amy's sleeping bag. She was thrashing around, caught in some kind of nightmare. "The children," she was saying, "they're so hungry. They need to eat, need to grow." Dr. Stone was watching her with an expression I'd never seen before, like he was studying her, like he was deciding something. "Dr. Stone, help me wake her up." But he didn't move. He just kept staring at Amy with those hungry eyes. That's when I saw the marks on his arms. Bite marks. Recent ones. I should have evacuated them right then, but the weather was getting worse again, and the radio was acting up. I managed to get one message through to base, requesting emergency pickup, but then the system went dead. Over the next 3 days, things got much worse. Dr. Stone stopped pretending to eat normal food. I found him in the storage shed, gnawing on a frozen fish we'd brought for bait. When I confronted him, he looked at me with those sunken eyes and said, "You don't understand. The hunger is everything. It's all that matters." Amy started sleepwalking. I'd find her standing outside in the snow, wearing only her underwear, talking to something I couldn't see. She'd be blue with cold, but she never seemed to notice. Marcus began obsessing over the historical documents. He'd found a journal from one of the 1847 trappers, and he read it over and over. "Listen to this," he'd say. "He writes about the hunger, about how it changes you, about how it makes you see things differently." Sarah was the worst. She'd started cutting herself, small cuts on her arms and legs. When I asked her why, she said, "I need to know what I taste like. I need to know if I'm ready." On the fourth night, I woke up to find all four of them standing around my sleeping bag. They were holding kitchen knives, and they were all staring at me with the same hungry expression. "You look healthy," Dr. Stone said. "Strong. You'd last us a long time." I grabbed my radio and backed toward the door. "Stay away from me." "You can't leave," Amy said. "You're part of it now. You've been here too long. You've breathed the air, drunk the water. You're changing too." And she was right. I could feel it. A gnawing emptiness in my stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. A craving for something that regular food couldn't satisfy. I made it outside and ran toward the lake. Behind me, I could hear them following, their feet crunching in the snow. But then the footsteps stopped, and I heard something else. A sound like wind through trees, but there was no wind. A sound like voices, but too low to understand. And underneath it all, something that might have been laughter. I turned around and saw them standing in a line at the edge of the cabin lights. They weren't moving, just watching me. And behind them, in the darkness between the trees, I saw something else. It was tall, maybe 12 feet. thin like a skeleton but with long arms that ended in claws. Its head was wrong, too big, with antlers like a deer. And its eyes were hungry. "Do you see it now?" Dr. Stone called out. "Do you see what we've awakened?" The thing in the woods made that sound again. Not quite laughter, not quite screaming. And I felt an answering hunger rise up in my chest, so strong it almost doubled me over. I ran. The next morning I found Amy in the storage shed. She was dead, but not from the cold. Someone had been eating her. Not all of her, just pieces. Like whoever did it had been trying to make her last. The others were gathered around Dr. Stone in the main cabin. He was reading from the trapper's journal, and his voice had changed again, deeper, like there was something else talking through him. "The hunger is a gift," he was saying. "It shows us what we really are, what we've always been. Animals pretending to be human." Marcus and Sarah were nodding along, but I could see the fear in their eyes. They were fighting it, but they were losing. "The Wendigo doesn't create the hunger," Dr. Stone continued. "It just removes the barriers that keep us from admitting it's there. We're all cannibals. We just need the right circumstances to remember." That's when I understood. This wasn't just about the creature in the woods. This was about something that had been sleeping in the human mind all along, waiting for the right trigger to wake up. And I could feel it waking up in me too. The supply plane should have come that day, but it didn't. I found out later that it had crashed 20 miles away. The pilot was alive but injured, and the rescue team couldn't reach him because of the storm. We were truly alone now. That night, Dr. Stone told us the truth about his research. He hadn't come to study the 1847 incident. He'd come to recreate it. The university had funding from some government agency that wanted to understand how extreme conditions affected human behavior. They wanted to know at what point that civilized people would turn to cannibalism. "But it's more than that," he said. "The location matters. This place remembers. The Wendigo isn't just a legend. It's a psychic impression, left by the original tragedy, and it's been waiting for someone to feed it again." Marcus had found more documents in the university's files. The 1847 incident wasn't the first. There had been other groups, other tragedies. The area had a history of cannibalism going back hundreds of years. "The native tribes knew," Marcus said. "That's why they avoided this place. But we white people, we never listened." Sarah had stopped talking entirely. She just sat in the corner, rocking back and forth, chewing on her own fingers. I tried to radio for help, but every frequency was filled with static, except for one. On that frequency, I could hear voices, faint but getting clearer every day. They were speaking a language I didn't recognize, but somehow I understood them. They were hungry. They had been hungry for so long, and they wanted us to join them. On the 7th day, I woke up to find Dr. Stone standing over me with a knife. His face was different, gaunt, with teeth that looked too sharp. "It's time," he said. "The hunger is too strong. We need fresh meat." I rolled away just as he brought the knife down. It missed my chest but cut a deep gash in my arm. The pain was sharp and immediate, but underneath it was something else. A terrible understanding. My blood smelled good. It smelled like food. I grabbed a piece of firewood and hit him in the head. He went down hard, and I heard his skull crack against the floor. But he didn't stay down. He got back up, and now there was blood running down his face, and he was smiling. "You see it now," he said. "You smell it. You want it. The hunger never lies." He was right. I could smell the blood, and part of me wanted to taste it. The same part that had been growing stronger every day we'd been here. I ran outside, and there it was, the Wendigo, standing in the middle of the frozen lake, 12 feet tall and thin as a skeleton. Its antlers caught the moonlight, and its eyes were like burning coals. When it spoke, its voice was like wind through dead leaves. "You have fed me well," it said, "but I am still hungry. I am always hungry. What do you want?" "What I have always wanted, to turn humans into what they truly are, to remove the lies they tell themselves about civilization and morality, to show them that they are nothing but meat that thinks. Behind me, I could hear the others coming out of the cabin. Dr. Stone was laughing and Marcus was crying. Sarah was making sounds that weren't quite human anymore. "You can't have us," I said. "I already have you. You felt it, didn't you? The hunger, the desire. You wanted to taste his blood. Soon you'll want more than that." It was right. I could feel the hunger growing inside me, like a living thing with claws and teeth. I could picture myself eating Dr. Stone, eating Marcus, eating Sarah. And the worst part was that it didn't horrify me as much as it should have. The Wendigo stepped closer. "Your grandmother's people understood. They knew that some hungers cannot be satisfied. They knew that some places should be left alone. But you forgot. You always forget." "I remember now," I said. "I remember the stories." "Then you know there is only one way to break the cycle." I looked back at the cabin, at the three people who had become something else under the creature's influence. I thought about Amy, dead in the storage shed. I thought about all the other groups who had come here over the years, all the other times the hunger had been fed. Then I thought about the emergency flare gun in my pack. "Yes," the Wendigo said, reading my thoughts. "Fire purifies. Fire cleanses. Fire breaks the cycle." I walked back to the cabin, past Dr. Stone and the others. They watched me go but didn't try to stop me. They knew what I was going to do. Inside, I found my pack and pulled out the flare gun. The red emergency flare felt warm in my hand. "You can't," Marcus said from the doorway. "We need this place. We need the hunger. It's the only thing that makes sense anymore." "No," I said. "My grandmother was right. Some places should be left alone." I fired the flare into the pile of documents and supplies. The old paper caught fire immediately, and the flames spread quickly to the wooden walls. The others screamed, not from fear, but from rage. They rushed toward me, but I was already moving toward the door. Behind me, the fire roared to life, consuming everything. Outside, the Wendigo was waiting. "You think fire will stop me?" it asked. "No," I said, "but it will stop them. And without fresh victims, you'll have to wait for the next group. Maybe they'll be smarter. Maybe they'll listen to the warnings." The creature's laugh was like breaking glass. "There is always another group. There are always more people who think they know better than the old stories." The fire had spread to the other cabins now. I could hear Dr. Stone, Marcus, and Sarah screaming inside, but I couldn't tell if they were burning or if they were just angry about losing their chance to feed. "And you," the Wendigo said, "you will carry the hunger with you. You will remember what it felt like to want human flesh. You will know that the capacity for cannibalism lives inside every person, waiting for the right moment to emerge." It was right. I could feel the hunger inside me. Quieter now, but still there. Still waiting. The rescue team found me 3 days later, sitting in the snow next to the burned ruins of the research station. I was hypothermic and malnourished, but alive. The official report said that the fire had been started by a faulty heater and that the research team had died of smoke inhalation. They never found Amy's body. That was 30 years ago. I left the Park Service after that, moved to Toronto, got a job in an office. I told myself I was done with the wilderness, done with isolation, done with places that remembered pain. But the hunger never left me. It's manageable most of the time. I keep busy, stay around people, avoid being alone for too long. I've learned to recognize the early warning signs. The way food stops tasting right. The way I start looking at people differently. The way my dreams fill with blood and meat. Winter is the worst. When the days get short and the cold sets in, I can feel it waking up inside me. The craving for something that regular food can't satisfy. The desire to sink my teeth into warm flesh and taste the life flowing out of it. I've never acted on it. I've never hurt anyone. But I know I could. I know that under the right circumstances, with the right pressure, I could become like Dr. Stone and the others. I could feed the hunger. My husband thinks I have an eating disorder. I've never told him the truth. How do you explain to someone that you're afraid of your own appetite? How do you tell them that sometimes when you're cutting meat for dinner, you have to stop because you're thinking about what human flesh might taste like? We never had children. I told my husband it was because of fertility problems, but that's not the whole truth. I'm terrified of passing the hunger on to the next generation. I'm terrified of what might happen if I had a child and the hunger got too strong. Sometimes I wonder if other people feel it too, if the capacity for cannibalism is really sleeping inside everyone, waiting for the right trigger. I wonder if civilization is just a thin shell covering something much darker and more primitive. I've done research over the years. There are other places like Canoe Lake, spots where terrible things happened long ago, where the land itself seems to remember the violence. Usually they're isolated, forgotten, marked only by old legends and tribal warnings, but sometimes people find them anyway. Sometimes researchers or campers or hunters stumble across these places and wake up things that should have stayed asleep. The hunger is patient. It can wait decades, centuries for the right people to come along. People who don't believe in the old stories, who think they're too smart to be affected by superstition. I still dream about the Wendigo sometimes. In my dreams, it's still standing on that frozen lake, still waiting for the next group of victims, still hungry. And in my dreams, I'm standing there with it, and I'm hungry too. Last month, I got a call from a graduate student at McMaster University. She's planning a research trip to study historical cannibalism incidents in northern Ontario. She mentioned several locations, including Canoe Lake. I told her not to go. I told her about the legends, about the warnings, about the places that should be left alone. She thanked me for my concern and said she'd be careful. They always say they'll be careful. The hunger is waiting. It's always waiting. And sooner or later, someone will feed it again. My name is Rebecca Clearwater, and I am a survivor of the Wendigo curse. I am also its carrier, its warning, its promise of what humans can become when civilization falls away. I am telling you this story as a warning. If you ever find yourself in a place where the silence is too complete, where the animals have all fled, where the very air tastes of old hunger, leave. Don't stay to investigate. Don't try to be brave or scientific or rational. Just leave. Some places remember, some hungers never die, and some warnings should be heeded. My name is Jonathan Whitehawk, and I've been a ranger at Olympic National Park for 22 years. Most people call me John. I'm telling you this story because it needs to be told, even though nobody will believe it. Hell, I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't lived through it. It was March 1993 when everything changed. I was 48 then, married to Sarah, and we lived in a small cabin near the Hoh rainforest. My grandmother was Kino, and she used to tell stories about the forest father, some ancient spirit that watched over the sacred groves. I always thought they were just metaphors, ways to teach respect for nature. I was wrong. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. Rain had been falling for 3 days straight, the kind of steady downpour that turns the forest floor into a sponge and makes every step echo. My radio crackled with dispatch telling me about illegal logging activity in the restricted zone near the old-growth grove. Sector 7, they called it on the maps. My grandmother called it the heart of the forest. I'd stopped over 300 illegal operations in my career. This should have been routine. Load up the truck, drive out, document everything, arrest whoever was still there. Usually they ran when they saw my uniform. But something felt different about this one. The dispatcher's voice had an edge to it. "John, you need to see this yourself," she said. "The logging crew, they're gone. All of them. Equipment's still running." The drive took 2 hours on muddy logging roads. Ancient Douglas firs towered over me like cathedral pillars, their branches so thick they blocked out most of the gray sky. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No bird songs, no squirrels chattering, just the hum of my truck engine and the whisper of rain on leaves. When I reached the grove, I understood why dispatch sounded worried. 8 chainsaws sat abandoned in the mud, still warm. A bulldozer idled next to a pile of cut branches. Coffee cups sat half empty on a makeshift table. It looked like everyone had just vanished in the middle of work. But that wasn't the strangest part. The trees they'd been cutting were healing. I'm not talking about regrowth. I mean the cuts were actually closing up, bark flowing back together like water. I touched one of the healed spots and felt it pulse under my fingers like a slow heartbeat. 22 years of forestry training, and I'd never seen anything like it. I called it in, but my radio just gave me static. Cell phone showed no signal. The forest felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. I should have left then. Should have driven back to town and brought a full team. Instead, I started taking pictures and notes like this was just another case. The first body changed everything. I found Tommy Briggs 40 feet up in a Douglas fir, impaled on a branch thick as my arm. The branch had gone clean through his chest and come out his back. But here's the thing. There was no way to climb that tree. No rope, no ladder, no footholds. The nearest branch was 30 feet off the ground. Tommy was a logger I'd arrested twice before. Small-time poacher mostly. He wasn't the type to climb trees for fun, and he definitely wasn't the type to accidentally fall onto a branch that perfectly centered. Someone, or something, had put him there. I called for backup again. Still nothing but static. The rain was getting heavier, and fog was rolling in from the coast. I had maybe 2 hours of daylight left. Smart thing would be to secure the scene and wait for help in the morning. But I kept thinking about 7 missing men. Dr. Patricia Reeves arrived just before dark. She was an environmental scientist from the university, called in to document the damage to the grove. Tall woman, Richard, red hair, all business. She took one look at Tommy's body and went pale. "How did he get up there?" she asked. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." She set up her equipment while I searched the ground for clues. Her computer beeped and hummed as it measured soil samples and air quality. Everything seemed normal, except for one thing. Her instruments couldn't detect any animal life in the area. No insects, no worms, no bacteria. The forest was sterile. "That's impossible," she said, checking her readings again. "There should be millions of organisms in this soil." That's when I heard the whispers. At first I thought it was just wind in the trees. But the more I listened, the more it sounded like voices. Old voices, speaking in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. They were talking about judgment, about balance, about humans who took more than they gave. "Do you hear that?" I asked Dr. Reeves. She looked up from her computer. "Hear what?" The whispers stopped. We found the second body at dawn. Rick Morales, the crew foreman, was crushed under a fallen tree. But the tree hadn't just fallen. It had been placed, laid across him like a coffin lid, branches arranged in a perfect circle around his body. The pattern looked familiar, like something from my grandmother's stories. "This is ritual," Dr. Reeves said, taking pictures. "Someone's sending a message." She was right, but not the way she thought. I was starting to remember things my grandmother had told me. Stories about the forest father who judged humans by their actions, who protected the sacred places from those who would harm them, who could make the trees themselves fight back. "We need to leave," I told her. "Now." But when we got back to our vehicles, all 4 tires on my truck were flat. Not slashed, melted, like they'd been dipped in acid. Dr. Reeves' car was the same. We were trapped. That's when I saw the handprints. They were pressed into the mud around our vehicles, huge and humanoid, but wrong somehow. The fingers were too long, the palms too wide. Each print was 18 inches from thumb to pinky. Whatever made them was at least 9 feet tall. "Bears?" Dr. Reeves asked, but her voice shook. "Bears don't have thumbs," I said. The fog was getting thicker. I could barely see 20 feet in any direction. The forest was silent except for the drip of water from the canopy above. No wind, no insects, no birds. Just us and whatever was watching from the shadows. Dr. Reeves's radio crackled to life. A voice spoke through the static, deep and old and angry. "You do not belong here. She dropped the radio like it was on fire. The third body was different. We found Jake Morrison hanging from a tree, but not by a rope. Vines had grown through his body, wrapping around his bones and lifting him 20 feet off the ground. The vines were still growing, still green, still alive. His face was twisted in a scream that would never end. "This isn't possible," Dr. Reeves kept saying. "Plants don't grow that fast." But I was starting to understand. The forest wasn't just protecting itself. It was judging us. Each death was different, personal. Tommy had been a climber in his youth, so he was killed by heights. Rick had been a heavy equipment operator, so he was crushed by weight. Jake had been a small-time drug dealer who grew pot in the national forest, so he was consumed by plants. The forest father was making the punishment fit the crime. I tried to explain this to Dr. Reeves, but she wasn't listening. She was too busy taking samples and measurements, trying to find a scientific explanation for what we were seeing. Science was her religion, and she couldn't accept that some things were beyond it. "There has to be a logical explanation," she said. "Magnetic anomalies, chemical reactions, mass hallucination." That's when the trees started moving. Not swaying in the wind, there was no wind, moving, shifting, changing position when we weren't. Looking directly at them. I'd mark a tree with my knife, turn around, and find it 10 feet away. The forest was rearranging itself, making us lost in a place I'd known for 20 years. My compass spun wildly before pointing straight at the heart of the grove. Dr. Reeves's GPS showed our location as the middle of the Pacific Ocean. All of her scientific instruments were going crazy, displaying readings that shouldn't exist. "Something's jamming our equipment," she said. "Something's protecting its home," I corrected. The fourth body was the worst. We found Danny Kowalski buried alive in the middle of a fairy ring, a perfect circle of mushrooms that had grown up around him overnight. Only his head was above ground, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent scream. The mushrooms were growing out of his body, feeding on him while he was still alive. Dr. Reeves finally threw up. "We're all going to die here," she whispered. That's when I saw him. The forest father stood at the edge of the clearing, 9 feet tall and covered in moss and bark. His eyes were the deep green of old-growth forests, ancient and patient and utterly without mercy. He looked at each of us in turn, and I felt him judging, weighing our souls against our crimes. Dr. Reeves screamed and ran. I stayed frozen, meeting his gaze. In my head I heard his voice. "You know what you have done." And I did. 22 years of protecting the forest, but how many trees had I cut for firewood? How many animals had I killed for food? How many times had I chosen human needs over nature's balance? I wasn't innocent. None of us were. The forest father stepped forward, and the ground shook under his feet. Trees leaned in to listen. The fog swirled around him like a living thing. "Your people take," he said without moving his lips. "They take and never give back. The time of judgment has come." I found my voice. "What do you want?" "Balance," he said. "The scales must be even." Behind me, I heard Dr. Reeves screaming. She was running through the forest, crashing through underbrush. But the two, Reese, were herding her back toward us. There was nowhere to go. "Please," I said. "We're not all bad. Some of us try to protect the forest." The forest father tilted his head. "Prove it." That's when the logging company's security team arrived. 6 men in tactical gear, armed with rifles and chainsaws. They'd been sent to recover the abandoned equipment and find out what happened to the crew. Their leader, a man named Marcus Webb, took one look at the bodies and started shouting orders. "Secure the perimeter! Find the saboteurs!" They thought this was eco-terrorism. They had no idea what they were really facing. The forest father smiled, showing teeth like broken tree stumps. "More judgment to be made." The security team lasted 15 minutes. The forest itself turned against them. Trees grabbed their weapons with branch hands that shouldn't exist. Roots wrapped around their ankles and dragged them down. The ground opened up and swallowed them whole. One man was torn apart by a flock of crows that materialized from shadows. Another was impaled by a dozen arrow-straight branches that shot from the trees like spears. Marcus Webb made it the longest. He emptied his rifle into the Forest Father, but the bullets passed through him like he was made of mist. In desperation, he grabbed a chainsaw and charged. The Forest Father caught the chainsaw blade with his bare hand. Metal screamed against bark skin, then he closed his fist, and the chainsaw crumpled like paper. "You would wound me with my own children's bones," he said, his voice like wind through autumn leaves. "Feel their pain." Marcus screamed as his body turned to wood, starting with his hands and spreading up his arms. Bark covered his skin. His legs became roots that dug into the earth. His hair became leaves that changed color and fell. In seconds, he was just another tree in the grove, forever frozen in his finances. His scream. Dr. Reeves was sobbing in the mud. "This isn't real. This can't be real." The Forest Father turned to her. "You came here to study death. Let me show you life." He touched her forehead with one massive finger. Her eyes rolled back and she started speaking in tongues, not human languages, but the secret speech of plants and stones and flowing water. She was seeing the forest as it really was, feeling every cut branch like a wound, every fallen tree like a death in the family. "Stop," I said. "You're killing her." "She is learning truth," the Forest Father replied. "As you must learn." He turned to me, and suddenly I was seeing visions. The forest as it was 1,000 years ago, vast and wild and free. The first humans who came with respect, taking only what they needed and giving thanks for everything. The slow change as more people arrived, people who saw trees as lumber and streams as sewers, the dying of the old ways, the rising of the new judgment. "Your kind has forgotten the old bargains," he said. "You take life without giving life. You consume without creating. The balance is broken." "I've tried to protect the forest," I said. "I've spent my whole career fighting poachers and illegal loggers. Yet you heat your home with dead trees. You eat flesh from factory farms. You drive machines that poison the air." His voice was sad now, not angry. "You are better than most, John Whitehawk, but you are still part of the problem." I felt my grandmother's blood stirring in my veins. The old knowledge that I'd buried under years of modern education. The understanding that humans were supposed to be partners with nature, not its masters. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Choose," he said. "Your people or mine. The old way or the new. Life or death." Dr. Reeves was still writhing in the mud, speaking in plant language. Her skin was turning green, photosynthesis starting in her cells. Soon she would be like the trees, rooted and peaceful and beyond human concerns. "If I choose the old way," I said, "what happens to her?" "She becomes part of the forest. She finds peace." The Forest Father looked at me with eyes like deep pools. "As can you. Join us, John Whitehawk. Help us restore the balance. Your people will listen to you." The temptation was overwhelming. I could feel the forest's song in my bones, the deep music of growth and decay and eternal renewal. I could live forever, young and strong, protecting the wild places from human destruction. All I had to do was say yes. But I thought about Sarah waiting at home, about the children who visited the park and learned to love nature through education, not fear, about the good people who were trying to find a better way forward. "There has to be another path," I said, "something between destruction and surrender." The Forest Father was quiet for a long moment. Around us the trees swayed without wind, and I felt them listening. "Show me," he said finally. "Prove that balance is possible." I knelt beside Dr. Reeves and took her hand. She was burning with fever, her body fighting the transformation. But she was still human, still reachable. "Patricia," I said, "can you hear me?" Her eyes focused on mine. "The trees. They're screaming." "I know, but we can help them. We can find a way to heal the damage without destroying everything." I looked up at the Forest Father. "Give her a chance. Give us all a chance. Let us try to make things right." The ancient being considered this. "And if you fail, then judge us fairly. But give us time to prove that some humans can change. The Forest Father reached out and touched my forehead. I felt his presence in my mind, vast and patient and impossibly old. He was showing me the network of guardians like himself, watching over sacred places all around the world. They were all preparing for a final judgment, a cleansing that would restore the balance by removing humanity from the equation. One chance, he said, but you will be responsible. You will be the bridge between worlds. Can you bear that weight? I thought of my grandmother's stories, of the responsibility that came with understanding, of the choice between fear and wisdom. Yes, I said. The rescue team found me 3 days later, alone in the grove. Dr. Reeves was gone, not dead, but changed. She'd become something between human and plant, a guardian of the liminal spaces. Sometimes I see her in the forest, tending to saplings with hands that are half root, half flesh. The official report blamed the deaths on a logging accident and mudslide. The bodies were never found, and the families were paid compensation for workplace fatalities. Nobody asked too many questions. Nobody wanted to know the truth. But I know, and now I have work to do. The Forest Father kept his bargain. He gave humanity one more chance, but he made me the watchman. I can feel his presence in every tree, hear his voice in every wind. When people threaten the sacred places, I'm there to stop them, sometimes with words, sometimes with warnings they can't ignore. The logging company never came back to Sector 7. Word got out that the place was cursed, that people who went there didn't come back. The grove was officially designated a restricted wilderness area. Hikers avoid it. Even the Forest Service workers won't go there alone. I retired from the Ranger Service a year later. Too many questions, too many strange incidents, but I never really left. I built a cabin at the edge of the grove where I can watch and listen and remember. Sarah thinks I've become obsessed with environmental protection. She's not wrong. I spend my days teaching people about the old ways, about respect and balance and the consequences of taking more than we give. Most don't listen, but some do, and those few give me hope. The Forest Father is still out there, still judging, still waiting. The network of guardians grows stronger every year. They're preparing for something big, a final reckoning that will come when humanity's last chance is used up. I've bought you, it's time, but I don't know how much. The forests are still dying. The oceans are still poisoned. The balance is still broken. And somewhere in the deep woods, ancient eyes are watching, patient as stone, waiting for the moment when the old bargains are finally broken forever. My grandmother was right about the Forest Father. He's not evil. He's necessary. He's the voice of the earth itself, crying out for justice. And someday, if we don't learn to listen, he'll stop asking for balance and start demanding it. I'm 53 now. The trees whisper my name when I walk through the forest. Animals come to me without fear. I can feel the pulse of the earth under my feet, the slow heartbeat of the world itself. The Forest Father chose me as his messenger, but I'm getting old. Someday soon, I'll need to find someone else to carry this burden. Someone who can hear the trees sing and feel the weight of ancient judgment. Someone who understands that the mountain is watching and the mountain remembers everything. And when that day comes, when the last guardian falls and the final warning goes unheeded, the Forest Father will rise from every sacred grove on earth. The trees will walk again. The old laws will be enforced. The mountain's judgment will be final. That's my story. That's my warning. Take it or leave it. The choice is yours. But remember, the forest is listening. The forest is watching. And the forest never forgets.